spring of 1854, an investigation revealed that Ward 7 of Virginia's Western State Asylum had achieved something truly horrifying: a perfect death rate. Not a single patient admitted to this particular ward in over 2 years had ever walked out alive. This isn't fiction. This isn't folklore. This is the documented reality of one of America's most sinister medical scandals that authorities tried to bury forever. But the dead don't stay silent for long. The year was 1854, and the rolling hills of Staunton, Virginia, housed what many considered a beacon of modern medicine. The Western State Lunatic Asylum stood like a fortress against the mountain backdrop. Its red brick walls promised hope to families desperate for answers. The asylum had opened its doors in 1828, built on the revolutionary idea that mental illness could be treated rather than simply contained. Dr. Francis Stribling, the asylum superintendent, was a respected figure in the early psychiatric community. He championed moral therapy, believing that kindness and structured environments could restore damaged minds. His reputation stretched far beyond Virginia's borders. He was one of the founding fathers of what would later become the American Psychiatric Association. But beneath the polished exterior of medical progress, something dark was growing in Ward 7. The ward was located in the asylum's east wing, separated from the main facilities by a long, narrow corridor that seemed to stretch into perpetual shadow. Unlike other wards, Ward 7 had no windows facing the courtyard. Its patients saw only the dense Virginia woods through barred windows, where morning mist clung to the trees like ghostly fingers. Martha Henderson was the first to notice something wrong. As the head matron, Martha had worked at the asylum for nearly a decade. She knew every creak of the floorboards, every patient's particular needs, every doctor's habits. But Ward 7 troubled her deeply. In her daily reports, she began documenting strange patterns. Patients would arrive at Ward 7 showing signs of improvement from their previous treatments. They would walk through those heavy wooden doors with hope in their eyes, speaking coherently, sometimes even smiling. But within weeks, their condition would deteriorate rapidly. They would become withdrawn, refuse food, and develop mysterious physical ailments. Most disturbing of all, they would whisper about the treatments that occurred at night. Dr. Edmund Hartwell oversaw Ward 7. Unlike Dr. Stribling's compassionate approach, Hartwell believed in aggressive intervention. He was a thin man with cold gray eyes who spoke in medical terms that made suffering sound scientific. Hartwell had trained in Europe, where he claimed to have learned revolutionary techniques that could extract madness from the very soul. The patients called him the Harvester. Drop a comment if you think some medical practices from the 1800s were actually more humane than we realize today. By the winter of 1853, Martha's concerns had grown into deep fear. She began keeping her own secret records, hidden in her personal Bible. She noted that Ward 7 admitted roughly 2 patients per month, always the ones showing the most promise for recovery. These weren't the violent or severely disturbed cases. These were people who might actually leave the asylum one day, but they never did. On January 15, 1854, a young woman named Elizabeth Morris was admitted to Ward 7. Elizabeth had been brought to the asylum by her husband after she began experiencing what we might now recognize as postpartum depression. She had given birth to twins just months before, and the overwhelming responsibility had triggered episodes of deep melancholy and confusion. Unlike many patients of that era, Elizabeth came from a wealthy family. Her father was a tobacco merchant with connections to the Virginia legislature. This meant her case would be watched closely, her progress monitored not just by doctors, but by people with political power. Elizabeth's admission to Ward 7 would prove Dr. Hartwell's fatal mistake. For the first 2 weeks, Elizabeth's letters home were optimistic. She wrote about Dr. Hartwell's kindness, the peaceful surroundings, and her hope for swift recovery. She described the other patients in Ward 7 as a small, close-knit group who supported each other through difficult times. But then the letters changed. She began writing about strange medical procedures conducted in the basement of Ward 7. She described being taken to a room she called the laboratory, where Dr. Hartwell would perform experiments that he claimed would realign her feminine humors. She wrote about injections that made her feel as though her blood was on fire, and electrical devices that sent jolts through her temples until she couldn't remember her children's names. Most chilling were her final letters, which described other patients disappearing during the night. She wrote that she could hear screaming from the basement, followed by long silences that seemed to swallow sound itself. Her last letter, dated March 3, 1854, contained only one sentence: "I fear I shall never see my babies again." When Elizabeth failed to respond to her family's letters, her father traveled to Staunton personally. What he found there would expose one of the most horrific medical scandals in American history. Samuel Morris arrived at the asylum on March 20, 1854, demanding to see his daughter immediately. Dr. Stribling, unaware of the situation in Ward 7, initially assured Morris that Elizabeth was recovering well under Dr. Hartwell's specialized care. But when they walked to Ward 7 to visit her, they found Elizabeth's room empty. Dr. Hartwell claimed Elizabeth had been moved to a more secure facility for her own protection. He produced documents showing that Elizabeth had become violent and dangerous, requiring immediate transfer to a private institution in Richmond. But when Morris examined the papers closely, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The transfer date was March 4th, one day after Elizabeth's final letter. Morris demanded to see the transfer records for other Ward 7 patients. What he discovered defied belief. According to Hartwell's documentation, every single patient admitted to Ward 7 in the previous 2 years had required emergency transfer to other facilities due to sudden violent episodes. But when Morris sent investigators to these supposed transfer locations, they found no record of any patients from Ward 7 ever arriving. 43 people had simply vanished. The investigation that followed revealed the true purpose of Ward 7. Hidden beneath the asylum's east wing, investigators discovered what Dr. Hartwell called his experimental laboratory. The room was fitted with electrical apparatus, surgical tables stained with substances that were never identified, and cabinets filled with human organs preserved in jars. Martha Henderson's secret records provided the final pieces of the puzzle. She had documented not just the disappearances, but Dr. Hartwell's increasing obsession with what he termed therapeutic death. Hartwell believed that some forms of madness were so deeply rooted that they could only be cured by bringing patients to the very edge of death and then reviving them. The problem was, Hartwell had never successfully revived anyone. His experiments had grown more desperate as his failure rate remained absolute. He began using increasingly dangerous combinations of drugs, more powerful electrical currents, and surgical procedures that he invented as he went along. Each failure drove him deeper into his obsession, convinced that the next patient would be the one to prove his theories correct. The 43 victims of Ward 7 weren't just patients, they were test subjects in one man's descent into medical madness. Dr. Hartwell was arrested on April 2, 1854. During his interrogation, he showed no remorse for his actions. Instead, he insisted that his work was on the verge of a breakthrough that would revolutionize the treatment of mental illness. He claimed that the patients had volunteered for his experiments, though no consent forms were ever found. When asked what he had done with the bodies, Hartwell simply smiled and said they had transcended their earthly limitations. The bodies were never found. Hit that notification bell. There's more dark history coming that'll make tonight's story seem tame. The Ward 7 scandal sent shockwaves through America's medical community. Dr. Stribling, devastated by the revelation that such horrors had occurred under his supervision, implemented radical reforms at Western State Asylum. He ordered Ward 7 to be sealed permanently and established strict oversight procedures that became models for asylums nationwide. But the story of Ward 7 didn't end with Hartwell's arrest. Construction workers tasked with sealing the ward reported strange occurrences that defied explanation. Tools would disappear overnight. Walls that had been bricked up during the day would be found partially demolished the next morning. Workers complained of feeling watched, of hearing whispers coming from the sealed laboratory below. The work crew abandoned the project twice before finally completing it on the third attempt. Dr. Hartwell was declared insane and ironically committed to an asylum himself, the very Eastern State Hospital that had been Virginia's first facility for the mentally ill. He spent his remaining days in a small, windowless cell, claiming that his former patients visited him nightly to continue their therapeutic conversations. He died in 1857, found in his locked cell with no signs of violence or illness. The cause of death was listed as unexplained cardiac failure, but witnesses reported that his face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror. Martha Henderson continued working at Western State Asylum until her retirement in 1889. She never spoke publicly about Ward 7, but her personal journals discovered after her death revealed that she continued to see Elizabeth Morris walking the asylum's corridors for decades after the Ward 7 investigation. According to Martha's final entry, Elizabeth was always asking the same question: "Have you seen my babies? I was supposed to go home to my babies." The legacy of Ward 7 extends far beyond its immediate victims. The scandal led to the establishment of patient advocacy programs, mandatory inspections of medical facilities, and legal protections that we still rely on today. It proved that medical authority without oversight could become a license for horror. But perhaps more importantly, Ward 7 serves as a reminder that the most dangerous monsters aren't found in folklore or fiction. They're found in positions of trust, wearing white coats, carrying prestigious degrees, and speaking in calm professional voices about the greater good. The Western State Hospital still operates today, though it's been renamed and extensively renovated. The East Wing, where Ward 7 once stood, has been converted into administrative offices. Employees report no unusual occurrences. But sometimes, particularly on foggy Virginia mornings when mist clings to the mountains like ghostly fingers, visitors claim to see faces pressed against windows that had been bricked up for over 150 years. They're still waiting for someone to ask the right questions. The Ward 7 case reminds us that progress isn't always progressive, that science without conscience becomes the darkest kind of magic, and that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. In the end, Dr. Hartwell achieved something no legitimate doctor ever should. He proved that there are fates worse than madness, and sometimes the cure is far more terrifying than the disease. The 43 patients of Ward 7 never left alive, but their story refuses to die. It echoes through every medical ethics committee, every patient rights law, and every moment when we must choose between blind trust and necessary skepticism. Because in 1854, in the hills of Virginia, 43 people learned too late that not all healers come to heal. Some come to harvest.
What other dark medical mysteries from history should we uncover next? Drop your suggestions below if you dare to dig deeper into the shadows where medicine meets madness.